Conflicts exist in all people's lives, but don't despair. You can learn how to change your behavior to free yourself from challenging situations with friends, family, and colleagues. In this helpful book, organizational psychologist Jennifer Goldman-Wetzler dives into the emotions behind conflict. Her optimal outcomes method helps you identify behavior patterns, values, and goals by encouraging you to imagine an ideal outcome and compare it to what might occur if you walk away or take no action. Reality testing her options will lead you to your best possible outcome, freeing you from unnecessary conflict. The first takeaway is the optimal outcomes method offers practices that help you free yourself from repeated conflict. Conflicts are ubiquitous, but developing multiple differing perspectives can generate creative new solutions. You develop certain conflict habits that mire you in a conflict loop. The optimal outcomes method offers ways to break these repetitive loops. Some practices examine the emotions behind disagreements. Others help you develop the ability to merge your imagined ideal future with a reality that accounts for other people involved in the conflict. The second takeaway is understand the 4 reactions to conflict and notice your default response. People deal with conflict in 4 distinct ways. To break a long-running conflict loop, understand your own default response and change it. Though they can fearlessly face difficult business problems and lead teams with confidence, some competitive people blame others when difficulties arise. Their aggressiveness can cause others to either respond in kind or shut down. Avoiding conflict is no solution, however. Unaddressed issues will rise to the surface again in the future. A third response is to judge yourself so negatively when a conflict arises that it prevents you from moving forward. The fourth reaction is to collaborate beyond the point which serves your own interests. If you can't determine your default response, ask which makes you feel most at ease. It's important to know how you usually deal with conflict. You probably learned the pattern and rules while growing up. Your default conflict behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. It interacts with other people's defaults. The 5 most common interactions are blame and shame, blame and shut down, collaborate and shut down and shut down, and blame and blame. Identifying your habits and patterns is the first step to changing them. Looking realistically at a conflict will help you stop wishing the issue would vanish or that you or the other person were different. These thoughts don't help alleviate the situation, they perpetuate it. The third takeaway is learn to go beneath the conflict's surface to find its core causes. Conflicts may resemble the fight-or-flight situation of physical threats, but are more complex. To gain a wider perspective on any issue, map it. Creating a map allowed Bob, a founding CEO, to see a broader view of his issue with Sally, his friend and head of sales. A newly hired CFO told Bob, who wanted to sell the company, that as CEO he needed to reduce Sally's compensation. When Bob talked to Sally about it, she exploded. Bob's conflict map included a circle for him and one for Sally, connected with 2 lines to indicate their strong friendship. His circle was inside a circle for the executive team. Hers was inside one for the sales team. He put all these circles inside a larger circle representing the company. Bob recognized that his background, Sally's background, and pressure from investors and the CFO all exerted influence on the situation. Thus, as Bob considered his conflict map, he realized the issue involved multiple people and issues. Bob saw that the poverty of Sally's family while she was growing up could fuel her reaction. He also understood that his collaborative inclinations, which contrasted with his risk-taking entrepreneurial background, affected his comfort with making decisions. All of these elements played a role in the conflict. The fourth takeaway is, ensure your emotions help rather than hinder you. To deal with conflicts, understand how you think and physically experience your emotions. You may emote with lots of intensity or very little. Your level of emotional expression might derive from culture, trauma, or biology. You may show your emotions constructively by discussing them, or destructively by being violent or aggressive. You may express emotions easily or with difficulty. When feeling emotions, you face 3 possible emotional traps. You might have a knee-jerk response when your amygdala senses danger and reacts instead of processing the situation rationally. You might become unable to determine or communicate what you feel. Alternately, you might feel something intensely but find yourself unable to express that emotion. Avoid these traps by pausing before you act. Take time daily to proactively pause. When you identify your emotions, you can learn to use them for constructive action. In a conflict, other people's emotions derive from their background and are not only about you. If possible, define what you observe and ask them about your observations. For example, tell them they appear upset and ask if your perception of their emotional state is correct. The 5th takeaway is your values can mire you in conflict, and they can also set you free. Psychologist Carl Jung believed that everyone has a public self and a hidden or shadow self, which drives most conflicts. You must accept and listen to your shadow self. This self embodies your values, which can be ideal values that you are willing to identify, or shadow ones which you may recognize but aren't willing to name. Take a few minutes to list your top 10 ideal values. This will be easy. Then consider what values you hold but seldom acknowledge. For example, you may openly prize risk-taking but hold financial security as a hidden value. Whether you acknowledge it, you may espouse your risk value and attribute the desire for financial security or greed to the person with whom you're in conflict. There is no judgment attached to either type of value. One person's shadow value will be another's ideal. You may hold both values at the same time. For example, you can be a risk taker and prioritize financial stability. For Bob to honor his hidden value of financial stability, he realized he needed to share the financial details of the company with Sally and explain how her current compensation affected the situation. When you identify your values, highlight a shadow value most applicable to your current situation. Consider when you started to believe it, why you thought you shouldn't believe it, how it counters an ideal value, and how you can acknowledge it. When ideal values are at odds, conflicts can last a long time. Respect other people's values even if you don't agree with them. Look for beliefs you share with someone who has a different position on an issue. Identifying another person's shadow values enables you to separate from the conflict and gain insights into the other person. Consider how they behave and name a shadow value that might drive those actions. The 6th takeaway is free yourself from repetitive conflicts by creating your ideal future, a precursor to your optimal outcome. Once you change how you behave in a conflict, think of your best outcome. This is a precursor to your eventual optimal outcome. The pull of this optimistic ending will help move you from the past situation to the future. Instead of analyzing your outcome, imagine what you would like to happen. This helps you see the actions and discussions necessary to achieve that outcome. For now, don't worry too much about reality. Bring your solution to life by drawing, recording, and writing about it. For Bob's situation with Sally, he wanted to create a compensation package that the CFO, investors, and Sally would all find agreeable. He imagined hearing Sally say she thought the package was fair and saw them laughing together while taking a client out to dinner. The 7th takeaway is define the steps on a path to propel you out of the conflict. A pattern-breaking path, PBP, contains discrete steps to free you from your patterns and lead you to your ideal future. A workable PBP is simple and shows you how to act in new ways. Each step should provide cumulative forward momentum. When you define the steps to take, the first should center on you, such as choosing to take a brief time for reflection each day. The eighth takeaway is examine the possible repercussions your actions might generate. Examine the future consequences of your actions or inaction for both yourself and others. In the midst of a conflict, a small issue can become larger. You may think only of today's consequences when walking away from someone yelling, but what fallout might occur in the coming weeks, months, or years? How might the other person respond? Determine possible reactions and figure out how you might deal with possible problems. Bob thought it possible that Sally would agree to a meeting, but he figured she might become angry when discussing the compensation and yell at him. To prevent this occurrence, Bob decided to give Sally his proposal before the meeting and to email her that he looked forward to having a thoughtful, respectful discussion. He planned for what he would do if she got angry. He decided he'd take calming breaths and recommend they briefly stop the meeting. To strengthen his ability to pause, Bob experimented in a safe environment with his engineers. Instead of reacting with immediate anger to an engineering issue, he took a short walk when a problem arose. After cooling down, he spoke to the engineers. His staff responded by becoming more welcoming to him. The small test helped buoy his belief that he could manage his temper when talking to Sally. The ninth takeaway is, find your optimal outcome for the conflict, which might be quite different from what you expected. Like Bob, who was anxious about meeting Sally, you may hesitate to enact your plan. There are 4 reasons why most people fail to deal with conflict. The first is that you fantasize about an unrealistic ideal future while continuing to behave in your old way. Behaving in a fantastical future can make you feel psychologically and emotionally safe. The second is that you dream of walking away from the situation even when that is not a realistic option. Bob thought about firing Sally, but knew the cost of losing the business relationships and friendship was too high. Dreaming in this way may make you feel better in the present, but it leaves you stuck in the conflict. The third reason is that you assume walking away will carry too high a cost when it actually won't. If you want to change jobs, you may think the cost of moving and uprooting your family is too high a price. But you might be wrong. Realistically assess your options. The most common reason people avoid dealing with conflict is fear of change. Thus, long-term conflict becomes a comfortable new normal. To determine your next steps and to support your process, outline on paper the costs and benefits of your ideal future, of remaining in the conflict or of walking away. Since you do this sort of thinking unconsciously anyway, take the time to determine the practicality of each option. Bob's greatest concern centered on his ability to contain his temper and how uncomfortable the conversation might become. The benefits he identified for living in his ideal future were huge, however. The company would be in a better financial place. He would retain Sally's friendship and institutional knowledge. Bob realized his optimal outcome was in line with his ideal future. Defining the costs and benefits of your various options helps you realize which options are unrealistic. Identify one best option today and explore other options in the future. In spite of his fear, Bob met Sally and worked through the issue. He explained the larger financial issues and granted Sally greater freedom in her work. They changed their conflict pattern and began repairing their friendship.